Hey Todd, how's it going?
Awesome. How are you doing?
I'm super pumped. I'm so excited to see you. I couldn't think of someone better to kick off our sales fever summit with, the most sales fevery of sales leaders and sales excellence speakers. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us here today. I'm excited to talk about transparency selling, transparency leadership, because Todd is the transparency sales guy. And so I'm super pumped. So everyone, for folks who don't know me, my name is Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Modern Sales Pros, but also founder of Atrium. For those who don't know, Atrium makes an AI sales management software that helps sales organizations improve performance of their teams through the better application of data. Prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company way back in the 2010s, that was acquired by Monster Worldwide. And then that's really where I went from like a business generalist founder, right, to like first seller, first sales manager, sales leader, etc. Wrote a book on sales, early stage sales called Founding Sales, and then also started Modern Sales Pro. So that's a little bit on me. And so for folks who may not be familiar, Todd's going to introduce himself here, but I'm a big sales nerd, as is everybody in MSP, and so Todd writes some of my favorite books on sales, very modern takes on transparency and how to be candid, how to be open, and how to be real with both with prospects and also with your staff. So Todd, maybe you can give folks a little bit of a background on your background as a sales leader, and then we can kind of get into the transparency talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, thanks for having me, first of all. And second of all, like much to the chagrin of my wife, you mentioned being a sales nerd. Like,
Oh
I
yeah.
think my nerdery knows no bounds. I've multi-time sales leader, had a couple of really good exits. I joked that I was a B plus sales rep way back in the late 90s.
Hmm.
The late 1900s is a really old way of saying it, but um, I've always been a nerd for like the behavioral science of
Hmm.
decision making and learning. And
Yep.
then over COVID, I really accelerated my nerdery around the history of this profession.
Yeah.
And as we talked about kind of in our pre-show fist fight, I'm building almost a sales history library here.
I love
I
it.
spend my weekends, like when cool people are doing cool things, I'm reading late 1800s, early 1900s books and magazines on sales. Got a podcast called the Sales History Podcast
I love
that
it.
is just me riffing on different topics from then. As you
Hmm.
mentioned, I've written a couple of books, The Transparency Sale and The Transparent Sales Leader. And now I run my own business, teaching and speaking and taking the transparency piece, but making the connection between the why,
Yep.
transparency sells better, and then how do we apply it to your messaging, positioning,
Yep.
formal messaging, negotiating, and then now with the newer book, all of your leadership practices too.
Well, and I think that would be useful because, for folks who haven't had the benefit of reading the transparency sale, maybe you could kind of give folks the Cliffs Notes on that, because I know it's heavily informed by your experience at Power Reviews, if I'm saying that right,
Right
as a
on. Yeah.
sales leader at Power Reviews, and kind of like the rise of like portable information and portable reputation through reviews and what have you. So maybe you can kind of give folks like the TLDR on the transparency sales, so they can understand why they need to put it on their list and read it this weekend.
Yeah. The TL is still going to be like SL, like still long. But here's the story. So, yeah, you're right. I was the chief revenue officer of a company here in Chicago called Power Reviews.
Yep.
And by the name, you can guess, like you said, we were in the review space. And all of you have probably interacted with the technology before and not known it. We
Yep.
were kind of the engine behind, like if you go to crocs.com or Vineyard Vines or 1,000 other retailers.
REI,
Look,
whatever.
yeah, exactly. You look at
Yep.
the product, you scroll down, there's reviews. We were the engine behind it.
Yep.
Here's what happened. So I'm running a team. My marketing team partners with Northwestern University here in Chicago just to do a research study around, all right, when a website's acting as a salesperson, what do people do?
Yep.
There was 3 data points that came out of it, 2 of which changed my life like could only happen to a nerd. The first one that didn't change my life was that we all read reviews today, right? So they've proliferated everything, but at the time it was 96%. Now it's 99% of us when we're buying something we've never bought before. That's of medium to high consideration. We read reviews. Cool. No surprise. But here's the 2 that changed my life. Number 1 was that 85% of us go to the negative reviews first.
Oh, totally.
Meaning we skip the 5-star reviews and we go read the 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s. I mean, I already got the pitch. Now I want to understand the reality. And the last data point was that a product on a 5-star scale, and this is across all product categories, some skew higher, some skew lower, but a product with an average review score between a 4.2 and a 4.5, that is optimal for purchase conversion, meaning that a product that has negative reviews right under it sells better than a product that's got nothing but perfect 5-star reviews. And as a matter of fact, a product that has nothing but perfect 5-star reviews sells at about the same conversion rate as a product that has an average review score of a 3.25, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, people are like, wait a minute, what are you trying to pull on me here?
Yeah, I mean, subconsciously, we all know that perfection doesn't exist. And here's the thing. So again, that was when a website's acting as a salesperson. I really wanted to dig into why, and does that apply to human, B2B? Is that how our brains are wired? And the answer was emphatically yes, that, like you said, we don't trust perfection. We know that doesn't exist. And here's the thing. We don't buy when we're convinced, right? Like if we do, we're probably pissed about it 20 minutes later. We buy when we can predict. We are prediction machines, and we actually need to know if we're trying to figure out if the juice is going to be worth the squeeze of this purchase based on my available resources, dollars, and time versus other things. We need to know the squeeze to even process the flavor and nutrition of the juice. And so as it turns out, transparency sells better than perfection. And because of the proliferation of reviews and feedback, we got to do it anyway. So we started injecting ideas around that into our team and in our approach. And Power Reviews became Chicago's fastest growing tech company from 2014 to 2017. And I swear it wasn't because we were the superior solution. It was because we were differentiating in the way that we sold. We were helping customers predict. We were winning faster. We were qualifying in better. We were qualifying out faster the deals we were going to lose anyway too. And, and that was kind of the core. So to TLDR on that, as it turns out, when we lead with what we give up to be great at our core, we help our customers better predict, and we spend the most precious inventory we have to convert to revenue more effectively, and that is our time.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because like, what's everyone's favorite answer in sales? Yes, right. But what's the second best answer?
Yeah, it's no, and it's got to be no fast.
Quick no. Right. Versus like beating around the bush, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's all about qualifying out. It's so funny because I was thinking about Founding Sales, my book. Like I was on Amazon on the other day, and there's this like kind of negative 3-star review, which has kind of like been pissing me off. And it's like right at the top. And the funny thing about it is that under your framework, it's exactly right. Because what's essentially the person's saying is they're like, yeah, you know, this book is kind of long. And it is, right? Like Founding Sales is like, and it's funny, like I actually say this to people when I give it to them. I'm like, look, don't read this thing all the way through. It's not a page turner. It is chronologically like written such that like you're at this stage right here, like don't go read it about like how to hire a sales manager, how to manage a sales team, whatever. Like just don't, right? Like, and so like that's the funny thing is the review is like, you know, it's like, hey, you know, this is kind of long, and like, you know, the second half is more on sales management, and I'm just like, and I think the funny thing about it is, it's just like, if you read that in combination with the other pluses, then someone would be like, got it, I'm looking for a textbook that is exhaustive. Like Jeremy Donovan has a review that's like, the top positive rated one, where he's like, oh, this is like exhausted, it's a tour de force, da, da, da. And I'm like, oh, okay, if you combine those two things,
Yeah.
it's like, it is true, it is like truthful. And like, if you're looking for a weekend read where it's like 100 pages long, and like, you just kind of want the cliff notes on like early stage selling, like this is probably not it. Versus if you're looking for something that's like, the real deal, that like you're going to use as your Bible and and dog ear and post-it note or whatever there. Anyway, but it's still like, the funny thing is like, I'm still kind of like, oh, grump, right? Versus saying like, actually, that's okay. And I think sellers probably have that too, where like, we want to be like, oh, no, it's all like rainbows and unicorns and whatever. Like, oh, well, like, do you help with XYZ? Well, yeah, like we could probably, if you squint, we could probably help with that, right?
Right.
Versus like, no, man, like we don't do that, right?
Yeah. You've triggered so many things there. I'll give you like just one analogy for everybody is like, my wife and I are kind of old souls. Like, if we go out to dinner, it's like Wednesday at 5, right?
Say 5,
not,
yeah, nice.
And like, we'll be looking for a new restaurant to go to. You read the reviews, and like, there's all these bad reviews around. Like, gosh, I went Saturday night at 7, and the service was terrible, and it was like, it was a mess. And I'm like, all right, cool. It lends credibility to all of it. How's the food? Because we're going to be going like Wednesday at 4:30. The service will probably be fine. Like, tell me that's right, what we all do. Now, the other analogy that probably relates really well is this idea that we can't possibly be all things to all people. And when we firmly define and set expectations up front with our clients, they come in better qualified, and they know what they're getting, right? And that's like IKEA is always the analogy that I make, which is, IKEA is the #1 furniture retailer in the world for 13 straight years, and it's a freaking nightmare, right? Like, you walk in, they give you a map, like, oh, this should be fun.
And the meatballs are at the end. You better follow your nose.
Well, yeah,
right?
It's like a labyrinth. You can't see where am I going? You find like the bedroom set. There's no salesperson around to find, like, to help you. You got to write down the code or take a picture of it with your phone, where you get to go to the warehouse, pull the 150-pound boxes onto a cart that doesn't have brakes, jam it in the back of your car, Tetris style, F-bombing your way through that. You get it home, you open the box, there's 150 parts and no words on the work instructions other than like Svarta. And when you get done, you're like, oh, that looks pretty good. Honey, we should go back and get the end.
Yeah, right.
Like, that's the point of this.
You just know what you're signed up for.
Exactly. Like, walking in, that you're not going to have a salesperson feng shui your living room. And like, that's not what it is. This is what you sign up for.
And it's cheap AF.
Exactly. That's the point, right? That they embrace this idea of, we're going to give you modern Scandinavian design furniture that you didn't pay much for. And the meatballs are pretty good upstairs.
Yeah.
That's the point, right? And I think that's an opportunity for B2B.
Yep.
And I think it's an opportunity for you as a sales professional or in marketing or anything to be leading with, hey, listen, we want to be the best in the world here. We don't do these things, right? And if those are going to be important, let's talk about that now versus 3 months from now.
Yeah. I think that's something that I think that is something that can be challenging when you're early stage, where like you don't have the confidence of your conviction to be like, yeah, we are this and we're not this. Especially like if you're in a new category and you're trying to sort things out. Like, I think Atrium is probably a great example of that, where especially when you have like, sellers who are maybe a little bit more junior folks are like, so how does this, does this help me with like forecasting or whatever? It's like, well, it's not for forecasting per se, but the way to kind of think about what this allows you to do is measure the inputs and the intermediaries, and like measure the activities and like pipeline velocity and things like that, such that when you do your forecasting, it's confident, you don't wake up with a low pipeline. But being able to be like, yeah, dude, like, this isn't going to help facilitate your roll up or whatever, that can like make you feel kind of nervous.
Yes.
Which I think is, I think like that concept of like nervousness as a seller also relates to like how you manage and you lead as well. And so, so Todd has a second book called, The Transparency Leader. And, that I really enjoyed as well. Although I'm forgetting the acronym off the top of my head, so like I need to go back and reread it, obviously. But maybe what you could do is share a little bit, because the Power Reviews sales organization was quite large. You've worked at a number of other large sales organizations as well. How did this transparency concept apply to the operating rhythm and the management of large sales I'm sorry, small and large sales organizations?
Yeah, it's funny. So 2008, I was running sales ops for a startup in the Valley, and I was working for a VP of sales who was kind of a mentor of mine. And I had always wanted to get into revenue leadership, right? Like that was my goal. I had told my CEO that when I first joined the company. Well, we were about 2 years in, so it's 2008, and I get word that the VP of sales has been let go. The company was not doing well. It was the Great Recession was starting.
Fun.
And my CEO calls me and is just like, "Hey, Todd, I know he was a mentor. Are you cool? Like, because we love you." Like, "Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, but like,
Thanks.
what's the next thing?" And he's like, "The board and I think you're ready. Like, we think you're ready to step into this role." And I think it was partially because I was cheap, but I was always such a nerd. And so I was like, "Yeah,
We
like
think
yeah,
you're Mr. Right now.
exactly, exactly." And so, like, I'm excited as all get out, right? But day two, I'm like, wait a second. As a salesperson, I always had a process, structure, framework. Now I'm in revenue leadership, and I'm like a dog chasing a car down the street, right? Never knowing what direction it's going. It's like, deal issue, personnel issue, got a board meeting I got to prep for. I got a one-on-one
Yep.
with my CEO. My brain doesn't work that way. I needed a
Yep.
framework and a structure. And so, being the nerd that I was, I created one. And it's called the 5 F's of building revenue capacity, but and we can talk through what those are, but it basically just became a way for me to go, all right, all of my responsibilities as a revenue leader fall into one of these 5 buckets. If I can have that in the back of my head and on paper at all times, I can see the holes before they form. I can see the macro of what I'm trying to accomplish all of the time. And it makes me sound really smart too, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And eventually this became a tool of transparency, which is with my teams, with my board, with my CEO during one-on-ones, with my peers. It was, hey, listen, this is the way that I think about revenue leadership. If we optimize all 5 of these F's, we're going to be doing as well as we possibly can in our revenue capacity attainment, right? And so the transparent sales leader it's not about transparency, which is weird. Like I was arguing with my publisher. I'm like, people think it's about being a transparent leader. Like that would be boring and short. It's about having a revenue capacity framework, all optimized by science on a bed of transparency. And that's what the book is, the 5 F's. And then there's different elements that pop into it. And if you'd like, I can rattle off what the 5 F's are and say,
Yeah, I think that would actually be really useful, because I do think that like the the notion of transparency as relate like you kind of nailed it there, where it's like it's on the bedwork of that. And so where does that come from? Well, it comes from our reps having transparent interaction with the market, which then of course informs an accurate rendition of the world. Like, what stage is this actually in? Is this actually qualified? Right? Like, oh, it's
Yeah.
qualified. Like it's in demo because I told him it works as a dessert topping, even though it's actually a floor wax. And so like it's in this state. And by the way, I have it forecast for 45 days from now, because he said like, well, I actually am looking for a dessert, right? And so then if you cascade that across an entire sales organization of like where you're engaging in behaviors like that, where you don't have like you're not being transparent, and so that's in like that creates BS stages, MBS forecast categories, MBS close dates. And of course, then if you then run that across 30 ops or 50 ops for a rep, and then you run that across like 20 reps, or you run that across 100 reps, and then you roll that up, like what you have is like a pyramid of BS,
Mhm.
which obviously is going to be really, really problematic for any manager or leader to like try to stand on top of, right? And so I think this notion of like that's the bedrock, and I think actually one of the F's is forecast, if I
Oh,
recall
absolutely.
or
Yeah.
all correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the longest chapter in the book because I'm such a nerd for that. But to kind of give you the 5 F's so that everybody has it if you don't want to buy the book. So basically, all of your responsibilities as a revenue leader fall into one of 5 categories. All of them. Like, and I do these when I teach leadership to revenue leaders. We put them on and like, throw it at me. But here they are. Number 1 is focus, right? And focus isn't like I need to focus on this. Focus is, as a revenue leader, you have a responsibility to make sure your team is using their most precious asset, which is their time, that they can convert to revenue optimally. So focus is ensuring they're working on the right opportunities, the right companies, the right firmographics, the right demographics.
Yep, ICP.
No science projects, right? So focus. And that's for a startup. That's for somebody taking over a new territory, like whatever. Focus is number 1. Number 2 is you've got a responsibility to establish and build the field. So your field is who takes the field with what. So that's the right people in the right places with the right experience, the right tools, and the right resources. All right. So in the field has to come second, right? Not the other way around. You got to build a field to attain that focus, not the other way around, right? And I see organizations flip those a lot. Number 3 is you've got a responsibility to the fundamentals, meaning making sure that your team gets the right things right consistently. Prospecting, discovery, qualification, proposing, demos, negotiating, all that. Number 4, to your point, is to a forecast. You as a revenue leader have a responsibility to predict the future. And that's not only the forecast, but it's the KPIs, the metrics, the things that help you be proactive instead of reactive. And then the 5th F, which is the cheesiest, but arguably the most important, is fun. And when I say fun, I'm not talking about parties and cotton candy and all that. I'm talking about you've got a responsibility to build and grow a culture where the team wants to show up every day, stay, do their best, and advocate for you, your company, and their job to their friends, which aids everything. So those 5, if you just go back and listen to this again and write those 5 down, you could have a 30, 60, 90-day plan done in 20 minutes based on that framework. Where are we in our focus? Like, what do we need to fix? The field organization, how are we optimizing that? The fundamentals, how are we doing? What do we need to do to fix there? The forecast, and then thinking about fun through the lens of culture and what I call the science of intrinsic inspiration, which has got another framework in it, but it's this idea of building a culture where your team wants to do their best and show up every day.
Yeah, I think that even though you're saying that like it's on a bed of transparency, I think one of the things that I took away from the Transparency Leader is it's a fantastic resource for a new leader who is joining an organization, because you have that your 30, 60, 90 kind of thing made me think about this. You have that sort of like moment where you're coming in, you're trying to audit what's going on, and so like doing a holistic audit, right, is an important thing to do, but like having that checklist can be very helpful in that lens there. And I know it was funny. Todd and I were talking in the green room about this. I was trying to remember exactly when the Transparency Leader had come out, and came out like a year ago or so. And so as everyone can tell, Todd's brain goes a mile a minute. And so I was asking him what was he working on next? What was his next magnum opus was going to be? And he actually noted that unsurprisingly, there's a lot of kind of like choppy economic environments happening right now, kind of annoying for sellers, right? A lot of people saying that they don't have budget, whereas previously like they may have been flush or what have you. A lot of no decisions, a lot of unfun answers, right? A lot of not fast no's.
Right.
And so, Todd, you were mentioning that you've kind of put together some resources on how to apply these transparency concepts in a a choppy kind of economic environment. Maybe you could share a little bit about that with everyone here today.
Yeah, and before I do, we had talked about this idea of me being a sales history nerd, and what's
This is true.
amazing to me is if you go back a little over 100 years ago, there was something called the Forgotten Depression of the early 1920s. And in it, if you look at the circumstances that led up to it, they look exactly to a spooky realization to what was going on today. And meaning, if you like 1914 to 1917, we had slow and steady growth, not slow, but pretty strong economy, looked a lot like 2017 to 2020. And then we had a short-term shut-off of the economy. It was 1918. That was World War I. Spanish flu was also going on too, but they shut off the economy for a short period of time. The U.S. headed into that, came out of it pretty quickly. All right. That looks a lot like March through summer of 2020. And then flip the switches, the pendulum had been stopped, swings the other way. And all of a sudden, if you look at late 1918 through early 1920, strong economy to the point where they had a great resignation going on. There was salesperson turnover of 65% during those 2 years based on more jobs available than people to fill them. Wow, that seems ironic, right? And then what happened? An inflation spike. I was ringing the bell in February of 2022. I've written an article saying, hey, everybody, this looks a lot like it. Be careful. Following the inflation spike, the economy dropped into what's called the Forgotten Depression. Salesperson turnover in 1921 was 77%, 1922, 85%. And that was not of the voluntary type, that was involuntary. Sales organizations purging their entire sales organizations. I was like, holy crap. Now here's the good news.
I've seen this before. What the heck?
It's crazy how accurate and exact it is. And there's a chart that they shared that I was like, holy crap, that's like, they could have just taken that chart and put these dates on it and we'd be living it. But the good news for everybody is, as this event is happening, we're starting to come out of it. We're starting to see those signs. Like, we're kind of close to the end. It's hard to predict exactly when it'll spit out, but we're close. However, to your question about things you can be doing, there's really three things that I'm not seeing other people talk about that I think are opportunities, not only when times are tough, but when times aren't tough. I'll give you one and we can talk about it and then we can decide how far we want to go. Number one. All right. So number one is a transparent sales leader concept.
Yep.
It starts by, I'm going to give you the weirdest analogy of all time. Japanese death row. Because why wouldn't we talk about Japanese death row?
Obviously. I think about it all the time.
Yeah, you should. I mean, here's the thing about Japanese death row. Let's say you get convicted, you're on Japanese death row. Horrible, right? Sucks. There's something unique about theirs. They actually don't tell those inmates when it's going to happen. Meaning, when they go to bed at night, they have no idea whether or not when they wake up in the morning, they're going to be like, hey, today's your day. And as a result, it drives them nuts. To the point where in 2021, so a couple of years ago, they got together with their lawyers and filed suit against the Japanese government, claiming that as the inhumane practice. The non-notification, no idea when the hatchet's coming. So tip number one that I've been sharing with every leader that will listen is on a regular basis. We're prediction machines. Our brains require that if your team is looking around and seeing layoffs and seeing their friends and you aren't even talking about it, your reps are going to bed at night like Japanese death row inmates, wondering if tomorrow will be the day. They don't sleep as well. They don't perform as well. They probably spend more time working on their resume, even if they get the impression that things are good. Unless you're addressing it, they are in this no person's land, right? They don't know. And so piece of advice number one is on a regular basis, you've got to be embracing what you know. So embrace the certainty, but sharing it transparently. Embrace the uncertainty. So again, you can't predict when this is going to end. you don't know if there's going to be curveballs, but you can create that acknowledgement that, hey, listen, we don't know all things. Here's some of the indicators we're looking at, and then create certainty around the uncertainty by, hey, every 3 weeks, we're all going to get together and I'm going to give you updates so that they can predict when those updates are going to come. But you got to play your cards face up around this. Otherwise, like I said, your reps are not sleeping well. They're uncertain because they see their friends. And if you're not addressing it, think like a Japanese death row inmate, your reps will rebel on that.
Yeah, they seem not that into that. That seems like a very good bro tip. We need to be transparent around like expectations and predictions. Makes a lot of sense. And that's, I think, particularly important for making sure that the organization has good continuity, et cetera. How does this apply to the actual like craft of selling and actual like selling behavior?
Well, I mean, we'll kind of go to another tip here for you. One of the things that I believe is, as sales professionals, well, there's really 3 things that need to happen when times are tough, right? Like, and these should be obvious. When selling gets harder, you got to be better at the job, right? True. So you've got to upskill as a salesperson. That also means that as a leader, when selling gets tough, leadership's importance becomes more relevant, right? You've got to be a better leader. So you've got to invest in leadership. And number 3 is, I believe you've got to be a better partner to your customers, because just like you, if times are tough and your wallet's not as full as it was before, you've got to scrutinize your purchases more. And that's what your buyers are doing now too. And if you're trying to be all things to all people and jam solutions, the thing about the mid-1920s was that high pressure selling became the vogue, right? Like all of a sudden, because times were tough, salespeople started pounding harder and they focused on convincing rather than helping customers predict. And so when we take these concepts and we help our customers, again, just like the Japanese death row things, I believe that our responsibility as sales professionals is to help our customers predict, be that partner and advisor to them. And that means transparency as well, right? Helping them by sharing what you give up to be great at your core, presenting your solutions as what they are, the 4.2 to 4.5, and you find that you're going to be a better partner to those customers too.
Yeah, for sure. The and I think that we're lucky enough to have Nick Mehta, one of the CEO of Gainsight, joining us for this virtual summit as well. And I think he'll probably have a lot of comments on that as well. Another I really like what you're talking about it around, as a seller, oftentimes what can end up happening in those sort of situations, you can, like, the impulse can be to push harder. And the gents who wrote the Challenger sale, the Challenger customer, what have you, recently published a book called The Jolt Effect, which is essentially like, dealing with the no decision, if you will, like, and people like not making a decision. And the surprising answer is not around like pushing harder or like ratcheting up the FOMO and, like, the fear of missing out and or like, throwing more discounts at them or what have you. But another good resource for folks to check out, of course, in addition to the Transparency Sale and Transparency Leader. Well, Todd, this was super awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to kind of get us kicked off here with the Sales Excellence Summit here for modern sales. Folks should follow you on LinkedIn, I presume, so you can they can have a continuous feed of sales thoughtfulness from you. Any other sort of things that you would recommend folks check out, or any kind of like recent publications or talks that folks should be checking out from you?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I wrote the first book, The Transparency Sale, I honestly thought it might suck because I'd never written a book before. But my goal was like, listen, I care about this profession and I want to make it better. And seriously, in my heart of hearts, I wanted to just share these ideas and get them out there, right? And that's how I kind of view LinkedIn, is I want to share these ideas, take them, steal them, use them. Like, cool. The other place that I share a lot of stuff is at toddcaponi.com, my website, where I blog articles, videos, all that, just like share. And then if you're interested in the sales history stuff, the Sales History podcast, I've done 3 seasons so far. I'm planning to do another season here in 2024.
Love
Where
it.
I'm just sharing. It's monologue. They're 15 to 20-minute episodes where I pick the topic, like the first cold calls. I found scripts from the early 1910s, the first sales kickoff, the first sales process, the first sales enablement campaign, which was actually executed by Mark Twain in the 1800s, right? Like there's
Sounds about right.
it's all kinds of stuff like that you might find interesting. And I also publish quotes, pictures, and articles from the early 1900s, late 1800s at Sales Historian on Twitter and Instagram if you're interested, just for fun. Total hobby, but thought I would throw it out there.
Sales Historian. I'm going to go find that on Twitter right now. Excellent. Well, Todd, thank you very much for taking the time, and everyone. I can't remember exactly who's coming up next, but I'm sure it's going to be someone awesome, just like Todd here. So thank you very much, Todd, and we'll see you soon. Okay.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Okay. Bye.